All right, welcome to Chapter 5, Diffusion in Solids. And today would like to address how diffusion occurs, why it's an important part of processing, how the rate of diffusion can be predicted for some simple cases, and how diffusion depends on structure and temperature. All right, so first we want to make some observations. So one of the things that we find is that if we were to take two different materials and bind them together, so maybe this is a film and we deposit a different type of material film on top, and then we allow some time to pass and we were to heat this up, especially that will help the process, what we would find is that there is interdiffusion. There's a movement of mass where the gray atoms would move into the orange and the orange would move into the gray. And so we'd start to see that the interface between them becomes diffuse. And this would continue until we get complete mixing. So we see that, that mass wants to move from high concentration to low concentration. Now, the other thing that we'll see is that even if we were to use one material and we were to go ahead and radio tag some of the atoms in that material, then, and we were to wait some time and measure the sample again, what we would find is that those atoms have actually moved around in the sample. So what we're seeing here is what's called self-diffusion. The main idea is that things are constantly moving and it doesn't depend on the fact that they are different materials. So that concentration difference isn't what matters. Like things move around even when it's a single pure element. So our mechanism is going to need to account for this. All right, so what's missing in those figures? Well, what's missing are point defects, vacancies in particular. So if I want to move mass around, I need somewhere for the atoms to be able to move into. And we've seen that vacancies are a defect that are temperature dependent. And so if I am to have a vacant hole here in my lattice, then any of the neighboring atoms can simply move into this space. Okay, and then that'll look as if the vacancy has shifted position. Any of those neighboring atoms can then move into that space, and then the vacancy looks like it's shifted position again. And so this process just keeps occurring. It's completely random, and that random process results in a mixing. And I'll show this to you in a simple kind of demonstration. Let's say a few other things we want to say about this. This particular sketch makes it appear as if any of these atoms would just fall into the hole. There's no reason why this atom would stay here if it can move over into this one. In reality, this lattice is tighter, and when there's a vacancy here, this whole region will relax inward a little bit. And so in order to move one of these atoms into the hole, it will actually first have to kind of push atoms out of the way. And so this means that there is an energy barrier for this process of diffusion. Okay? So we're going to get another Arrhenius equation like we saw for the number of vacancies. In this case, the Arrhenius equation is going to describe the rate at which we get diffusion, how fast this process occurs. So let me go ahead and just show you through a simple model here that a random process will result in the movement of mass from one material to another. So what we've got here is some material in red and some material in blue. We've got some vacancies in the lattice. And what the computer simulation does is it takes each vacancy and it randomly decides that it moves up, down, left, or right. And that's a completely random process. And so you'll see that these vacancies don't go very far because it's not biased. And so there's a lot of repeating. So they're just hopping around randomly. And hopefully what you can start to see is that there is some exchange here at the interface. We're starting to get some blue moving to the red side, a little red moving over here to the blue side. You can also see that this is a fairly inefficient process, so it takes a lot of movement, ultimately a lot of vacancies, to really move things around. So if we run this simulation a little longer, and this one is the same type of simulation, we have more atoms. And in this one, we're going to go ahead and take slices of like every, I think, 100 time steps or so. And so this will let us see longer times. And you can see now the movement of the green and the red into each other. And this is a concentration profile across that sample. So you can see that interface spreading out and becoming more and more diffuse. Again, a completely random process. And so that kind of explains what appears to be the movement of mass from high concentration to low, right? In terms of the red atoms, they would be at high concentration moving to low into the green. All right, so this process of vacancy diffusion depends on the number of vacancies that we have. So that's going to depend on temperature. And it depends on the frequency of which atoms actually hop into this space. And that's going to depend upon the activation energy, the barrier for the diffusion process. Now, another mechanism of diffusion is referred to as interstitial diffusion. Here we're moving small atoms in a host of larger atoms, and we're moving the atoms that exist in these interstitial sites. This might be carbon, say, in iron. And then this atom can now move to any of the neighboring interstitial sites. Now, at low concentrations, which is usually what we're talking about, all of the interstitial sites around this one are open, available. Okay, so this is one reason why interstitial diffusion is faster than vacancy diffusion, because this one already has its sites available, where the vacancy diffusion mechanism depends on the availability of a vacancy, and the number that we have. All right, now in this picture also, it looks as if this atom can just kind of zip through here. Again, in reality, this space is much smaller. These atoms are much closer. And so these guys have to actually move out of the way before this one would be able to hop into this site. So there's an activation barrier again for this movement, although it's smaller than in the vacancy case. So the second reason that interstitial diffusion is faster than vacancy diffusion is because typically small atoms vibrate faster and move quicker than larger atoms. Every time this atom vibrates, it's considered an attempt at moving into one of its neighboring sites. So if it's vibrating faster, it's attempting more often, and inevitably it'll get the right conditions and then it'll hop in to the next interstitial site. Okay, so that is the mechanisms, vacancy mechanism, an interstitial mechanism. And in the next video, we're going to go ahead and we're going to address why we're even studying diffusion. Why is this important at all?